It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, swinging, and how you can have secure and sexy relationships, no matter how you do them. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre. Hey, I'm Tara, one of your hosts of the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast. This season, you'll notice we're doing things a little bit differently. Firstly, we're going to be having some very special guests join us. And secondly, we're going to be repurposing some really awesome older content from before the start of the podcast when we were broadcasting only to our Let's Talk Polyamory private Facebook group. Included in this is our popular alphabet series, where we went through the alphabet discussing terms and concepts, not only just related to non-monogamy and polyamory, but covering things like sexuality, identity, wellness, and so on. And all of these terms and more are going to be included in our picture book, which is going to be released later in 2025. Super exciting. And now on to the episode. Good morning. Good morning. We're in a new location today, so we're feeling a little discombobulated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were up all night studying. As you can see, we're here in the library, really, wanting to research and become well informed about what's going on today.
Yeah, so today's an exciting day for us.
It is.
It is.
Yeah. But that's on a personal level. But every day is exciting.
Every day is
exciting. What's exciting about today is that we've been asked by somebody if they could join our group, and the person joining our group is very near and dear to us. It is my dear old mom. I shouldn't say old. She's very young in so many ways, but she is wanting to be part of this, which is so amazing because I think it really contrasts other people's experience, perhaps your own, that my mother is so open to the idea of everything. She supports and knows Sparkle Kitten, and she knows me and you and all that. And we were talking about what it's like to have such a position and how I am very fortunate that I am able to be so sex positive as a psychotherapist, but as a person. And it is due in part because my mother was so open with me. And talking to her, she tells me that her mother was also very open with her. It opens up this opportunity to be open, to be generous, to be accepting of it. And it's not to say that we necessarily subscribe to a lot of the same things or same beliefs, but we hold the idea that we might be allowing or understanding of it, right? So I might not want the same things you want, but I am wanting you to have the things that are good for you and that you're wanting, even if I don't subscribe to it. So it's that position. And part of the thing that we're wanting to do as sex positive hosts here, as therapist, life coach, is that relationship coach, is that we are wanting to normalize this by having the conversation about it, that we might be able to speak about all these things. They all fall somewhere on the spectrum of human sexuality, and that they are no better, no worse, that we might come to an understanding of them and be able to take them out of the shadows and talk about them so freely. That's what I have to say about that.
That was a lot.
My producer just gave me a pinch on the table that we need to hurry it up. We got a lot to talk about today.
A lot to talk about today. No, that was a good point. No, I love that you talked about that. And I love that she's listening right now. And in fact, we're going to have her on as a special guest sometime. Yeah, so pretty excited about that. Actually, a couple of family members. We did a video with my cousin as well that we might air. We might do something with him a little later. But so let's get on to
this makes me want to segue. So talking about normalizing and all this, one of the things we're going to speak about today is our part of our series in the sex alphabet, and we're at letter H today, or Ash, as some people might say in French. We want to talk about the normalization, and we're going to be talking about health for H, particularly sexual health, and talk about STI testing and the importance of it, and how do we bring it up in conversation, and why should we bring it up in conversation? I was also, in doing all this research, I was thinking also, so what, I might do STI testing or not. My business doesn't affect anybody else?
Not really.
No, not really at all. In fact, we are members of a community. Whether you are part of this community or not, when you interact with somebody else, you are creating those connections, and they will affect other people. Right?
For sure.
So we need to be responsible. Each individual be responsible, and collectively we will maintain a beautiful, healthy, loving community that is not disgusting or immoral, but is loving of each other, considerate of each other, and caring of each other.
Yeah, so we're protecting ourselves and each other, which I think is amazing. So
it is amazing.
Awesome. So let's get on to it. We already had a good start. You gave a lot of information there at the beginning, Andre. You're like worked up.
The caffeine's kicking in, man.
I guess it is. Yeah, I had a second coffee too, so I'm feeling a little thing.
Charge.
So sexual health. So our alphabet series with the letter H, sexual health and hair. But we're going to start with sexual health.
Yeah, can I say, just as we're saying that, like the idea of talking about it? So, I've been on both sides of it. I've been at the point where I was sexually active without getting tested regularly. And the idea of going to get tested for me was sort of embarrassing at first, or kind of, there was a little bit of shame connected to it that I have to ask for this test or what might have gone wrong and all this. And now my position is really flipped, where I am proud to say that I get tested regularly, that I feel as though I'm being responsible, both to myself and to you and other potential partners. And it has become, in my own mind, more acceptable and destigmatized. And we might go at it that way as well. And if you want, you get tested from your own GP, your own provider. If you're not so comfortable with them, you might want to examine that, but you might go beyond that. There are a number of clinics that will be able to help you with either free or low cost testing. There's no good reason why you should not be able to go and get tested.
Yeah. And I think it's important if you feel comfortable. And I think it's great to be comfortable with doing this with your own family doctor. I know for us, when we first did our first intake, I was upfront with them right away that I have multiple sexual partners and that I see people of various genders. And so
Good save.
Yeah. I was gonna say both genders, but there's more than one gender.
We're not binary. We try to resist binary.
Yeah. So in fact, every time I go in, she says to me, "Oh, would you like to get tested?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." Like almost every time.
Yeah, for sure.
But even if not, we don't go in. We do it at least every 3 months. And then we also do it if there's any reason we feel like maybe we were with people that we didn't know as well, or we are unsure of their history, but
something happens, condom breaks,
or something happens.
Sure.
Yeah. So we will get tested right away.
but what's interesting is that going back to what I was saying is, like, in the beginning, I might have been somewhat embarrassed or reluctant to go get tested. And now I wear it like a badge of honor, that I'm like, well, I was tested, a month ago, and it's been like 36 years of straight testing and all negative results. And I'm very proud of that. So it makes me want to continue to participate in that. But should it ever come back that there is something, then we kind of, we do the self-whistleblowing, and we hit the stop button and we tell our partners, look, my test came back this way. And we speak about it in a very matter-of-fact way, because that's exactly what it is. It's simply, there does exist these elements, and we announce that there is this, and then everybody can do the necessary things. So we stop having these contacts with people, and we take whatever medication might be necessary. But it is spoken about in a very clinical, scientific, matter-of-fact way. There is no judgment. It doesn't make us a good or bad person, whether we have or have not these things. It is just something that happens, and we will address it accordingly as mature, loving individuals.
And I think my experience and our experience, I'd say, with testing and people being very open in the polyamorous community is that they are people who people feel very strongly about testing and being open about it. I think where, it sort of is, I think often when you're just dating monogamously, often people don't have the same sort of things. I might be I might be generalizing a little bit, but people feel they don't need to.
Right. And it doesn't have that same pattern of communication. It was told to me very early on, and I absolutely agree to this, that being polyamorous, open, E&M, whatever you want to call it, is not as much about the sex as it is about the communication. That
and the relationships.
But that we do communicate this. Whereas when I was monogamous, I might not have been so forthcoming and said, well, when were you last tested? Because I would not want to make it sound as though I was some kind of scoundrel who was out doing the town, or that I would imply that they might have been promiscuous in any way. But it should actually be almost a second question. What's your name and when were you tested?
Yeah.
Good luck with that one. But it should come up rather sooner than later. And some people, unfortunately, still resist having that conversation, talking about that. We're getting way off. We got so much to say.
Okay, let's get into the kind of the things. So, but yeah, I think it's important to communicate. Okay.
Yeah, very good.
So STD versus STI.
Yeah,
what's the difference?
Of that?
Okay, so STD stands for sexually transmitted disease, where STI, which is the more common, there's been a shift in what people refer to.
I think it's marketing, but anyway.
Means sexually transmitted infection,
right?
Because I think a disease is thought to be more serious, and it's more progressed, where an infection is something that you can
exactly. So you might
treat,
but you might have an infection without a disease.
True.
Also, right?
Yeah.
But I think it was updated not only because of the practical part, but also there might have been some marketing there that people
Like the
think,
stigma?
yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
I
disease
don't. I
had more
can't
of a
say for
stigma
sure.
associated with it. I
Possibly.
don't know. If you know, let us know. But I think STI is the more common referred term. And I think I think it's because of the treatment. Disease is more progressed. But anyways, so let's start first with, so how do you prevent an STI? So it may seem obvious, but some of these things we're gonna say anyway, because I feel like why not? Why not? And there was a couple things. We've adapted this from various sources that we saw online, WebMD, you can do your own research as well. So
Mayo Clinic and CDC.
So the number one is using latex condoms or barriers every time you have sex or sexual interactions.
Well, what is sex? PIV?
No, I mean the entire thing. If you really want to be truly...
Right. Even with oral sex.
And everything.
What about hand jobs and things like that? Fingering, jillying and all that. Not jillying, but fingering or hand jobs, things of that nature. Would that also... In some ways it should, right? I mean, scientifically, technically, yes, you should have barriers and all those things, which kind of even goes to the rarely talked about dental dams, right? Do we use a dental dam when we're having oral sex? Not often, but if you really want to adhere to these principles, then yes, you should.
Yeah. So they're not 100%. Nothing's 100%,
right.
But used effectively, I think they go a long way. And I think the other thing to say is if you're using a condom for penis and vagina intercourse, whatever, is using lubricants. I think that's true actually with any, like if you're doing insertions or that sort of thing.
Yeah. How are lubricants able to kind of minimize or help minimize the incidence of STIs?
Because the lubricant allows easier movement, and so you're not drying or getting stuck in places or tearing and that sort of thing. So it helps keep the condom, I guess, in place and that sort of thing. Well, we had that experience recently. Wasn't us, but observed someone else where the condom got stuck inside the person. And there was a bit of panic there for a moment as they tried to find the condom, which was stuck inside of her. Likely because not enough lubricant.
But what I thought was fantastic, and they were fairly young people, but the first thing that they said right after that was, when were you tested? So I'm glad they brought up perhaps something that could have been brought up before.
Yes.
Sometimes not so sexy or romantic, but yeah, the first thing was, well, when were you tested? And then they each said when they were tested, and they said that they would go for testing afterwards, which is great.
Okay.
But it happens.
All right. So avoid sharing towels or underclothing.
That almost sounds like urban myth, right? Urban legend. Like, can you get gonorrhea from sharing somebody's underwear? Possibly not. But when I was in
True story.
When I was in high school, and I'll be the first to admit, when I was in high school, my girlfriend lent her girlfriend a bathing suit. The girlfriend went down to Cape Cod or someplace for the weekend and gave her bathing suit back. And then the next thing I know, I'm at dinner with my girlfriend and I'm looking deeply into her eyes, and I see a little crab on her eyebrow moving. And I was like, what? It was my first introduction to it. But yeah, the crab was transferred from each other through the bathing suit.
Wow.
And naturally, I assumed that my girlfriend was cheating on me, which she, anyway. So yes, it is possible to transfer certain STIs that way.
So here's an important one as well: washing before or after sexual interactions.
Yes.
And so the one online just said that, wash before and after. But the other thing is they didn't say, which I think is important, is also rinsing your mouth in between partners. If you're engaging, I think it was more of it wasn't intended for like multiple partner situation, that particular article, but rinsing your mouth in between partners if engaging in group activity.
So if you go to
hands and washing hands and parts, like everything.
So please feel welcome to, and maybe encourage, if you're at a sex club or an orgy, yes, wash your hands in between, rinse your mouth. Please do whatever's necessary to minimize the spread of.
Yeah. So some of the things we do is we have a little kit, and we bring, we have wipes and we bring mouthwash and that sort of thing to make sure that happens. So getting vaccinated where you can for things like Hep B. So that's a series of 3 shots, and you can get that pretty regular. It's kind of expensive. It is a cost, and if you have health coverage, it might be covered. But if you don't, you may have to pay for it.
Yeah, and the cost may seem prohibitive, but at the same time, if you are able to afford going out or drinking, this should be prioritized in your budget. I'll come out and I'll say it. You should really, this is important for us and for you.
We talked about getting tested, so we'll talk a bit more about the different types of tests soon.
But getting tested. So like I said, the first time that I asked for an STI tested, I felt kind of, am I going to be seen as some kind of perverted fellow, which I probably was anyway. But now it's become so automatic, so normalized that we just walk in there and they know this can happen. So even if I go in to my doctor for a broken toe or something, I'll ask for STI testing. But if I'm not scheduled to go in for a broken toe, I will schedule a test every so often just for that peace of mind, because I want to know where it's at for me and where it's going to be at for you and you.
Yeah. Okay. So here's an interesting one. And do you want to talk about the next one?
Let's see, about if you have a problem with drinking or drugging, please get help. People who are drunk or on drugs often fail to have safe sex, are asked their partners about their testing history. Absolutely. So, we might leave the house thinking, okay, I'm going to do the right thing. And I'm packing the condoms and whatever it is. And then after a couple of drinks, after a couple of lines, you might be like, in the moment and kind of get into it and feel like, oh, well, I can't really bring it up now because that's going to kind of like, put the brakes on, going to be the downer, whatever it is, whatever our reasons are. But it should not preclude or interrupt our stance in this, right? So go out, have fun. If you have a drinking, drugging problem, seek attention for that. But if you are doing it recreationally, go for it. But at the same time, do what is necessary. And you know what that means.
So this one's not going to be very popular, but one of the ways of preventing STIs is actually not having sex or sexual interaction with people. It's the only sure way, apparently.
Well,
unless you borrow your friend's bathing suit.
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting, right? She wasn't having sex with this other person,
or using
and yet was able to do that. But for 99% of the other STIs, STDs, yes, abstinence is the way to prevent them, right? So you could do other things.
Right. And then the last one they had was condoms with non-axle 9, which I haven't seen in a long time, probably since the 90s. That was it was something to prevent STIs.
It was a spermicide, wasn't it? But I wonder if the FDA, we'll have to research that. I wonder if the FDA might have recalled that, because you don't see it advertised very often. Maybe it's like this. I don't know.
I remember.
If anybody knows,
but it was very irritating to the people who have vulva owners. So, Okay. So how can I prevent giving an STI to someone? I feel like we're very factual today. Is this too factual?
No, it's good. Well, like we said, you can be abstinent, which is not a great option for many people and not something that they're going to really want to invest in that often. But on occasion, we might need to do.
So, So if you have any concerns about something that's happened to you, you've done something, you're not aware of your partner's activities, obviously getting tested immediately.
Condom breaks or slips off like the other night at the club or whatever. Then have that dialogue. And if you do, as you mentioned before, if you happen to get a positive test back, positive in a negative way, then yes, please hit the stop button and take the necessary steps. So inform the other people who might be affected by it, and they can inform what other people they might have come in contact with, and cease activity until you are treated and it's resolved.
So we had a situation that came up for us where one of your partner's partner had contracted something. Actually, we've had a couple of situations come up. And I think it was, I think given all the work we've been doing and talking about this, I felt fine about it. We just went and got tested. We told our own partners and there was like this whole network, and then everybody got tested, which is kind of amazing too, right?
But I think that was possible because we speak about it in a very factual, automatic, normalized way, right? So there was no question of blame or any moral judgment or any of that. We're all participants, and on occasion, it's like a cold in many ways, right? So, you try to sneeze into the fold of your arm, you use condoms or whatever it is, but on occasion, there might still be something floating that you come in contact with, and you speak about it the same way you would with the flu. I have a cold, and, you might be catching it as well, so I thought I'd let you know. And
I know sometimes people have STIs that are under control, but that are still in their system.
Yeah, like herpes, for example.
So I've, been in situations where people have shared that information.
Right. And then you can make the informed decision, because you might already have it or not, or say that, well, it's not active at the moment, so I feel safe about it, or I'm taking these precautions, but you will have the ability to grant your consent or deny it. Right. So it's all about the communication and respect for each other.
Yeah. And then one of the things was using condoms or barriers whenever you have sex. It said, especially with new partners. And I thought that was really interesting, especially with new partners, and why that specification.
Yeah.
To me, it implies that you may not be asking people what their history is or their testing regimen, but also you could have partners that you see frequently and for years, but if they're in a situation like where they're polyamorous or having multiple partners, that it's still may need to use, you still will need to use those things.
Right. Sure.
All right, so let's get into the details of testing. Hopefully you guys are all still with us. If you have any comments, definitely put them in the chat. We're just sharing information we know and what we've learned about testing. So there's lots of different types of tests, and I think it's good for you to inform yourself. And this is not going to be necessarily exhaustive, but inform yourself about what's out there, because I think the situation that could happen is there's assumptions made by healthcare practitioners, and you may not get the full slate of testing. Exactly. I think that actually happened to you recently.
Sure. Yeah, and you might have to ask for them, right? So they do like some preliminary screening. They might ask you, are you having sex with people who are bisexual or homosexual? Are you having sex with people who are IV users? So they may then select what type of test they're going to offer you. And that may or may not be sufficient for you. So you might have to kind of do a little bit of the thing and ask them. So when I go in for testing, for example, they may, given my profile, offer me a certain amount or certain styles of tests, screening for certain things that I might be more prone to, but I might have to ask them why to also like this in addition. And that's well within your rights. So feel free to educate yourself on what you might need, and then feel free to ask for what it is that you might need.
Okay. Okay. So one of the things we want to say too as well is sometimes there's not symptoms. So that's why it's important.
Like for sure, you could be a carrier and not have any symptoms of it, right?
Yes, exactly.
But the good news is that most STIs are treatable, and many are in fact curable. Arm yourself with knowledge, demystify it. Can you say it?
Yeah.
Demystify it? Yeah. And inform yourself. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, exactly.
So empower yourself.
Yeah. So here's a little bit of what to expect if you haven't had testing before. And so you can, like we said, visit your doctor or find a health clinic near you. There's lots that are out there that are very sex positive and open, and you may be more comfortable sharing your sexual history in that. So, whatever you need to do to get tested is that's what we'd like you to do.
Right. Sure. You could go to your doctor who knows you, or you can go to a health clinic and be tested anonymously.
Yeah. And there's no one STI test one test that covers all STIs. So that's what's important. So depending on what they're testing for is the type of things. So
it might be a blood test, it might be a urine test, and it might be a swab. Of your throat or your anus, depending on what it is.
Vagina.
Or your vagina, yes. Absolutely, yes, thank you. I think there's even a test that involves putting a swab in your urethra, which is very painful for penis owners. And I'm sure it's not pleasant for vagina owners either. But anyway,
it's just because the swab is also like size and then very dry. So sometimes I find it's like, if it's in your throat or inside you. But for vulva owners, you'll be used to these types of swabs when you have pap tests. So actually, that's another good way of doing it when you're having that test annually, is to ask for the extra tests at the same time.
Yeah, like we said, our preference is that anytime we go to the clinic, we're asking for testing, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it's there for that or not.
Yeah, but it's interesting, like since COVID, we haven't been to the doctor. Like I haven't been to the doctor as much. I mean, some things have come up for me, but I hadn't been as frequently because I'm not getting sick.
Well, I haven't had the flu in 2 years.
Yeah, I haven't had the flu or a cold. So interesting. Washing your hands and masks.
Like there might be something scientific there, but okay. Yeah. We have a whole list of different types of tests available for the different diseases, but I don't think we really have much time for that.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
You want to do it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so chlamydia needs a swab of the genital area or urine sample. Gonorrhea, same thing, swab the genital area, throat or urine sample. HIV is a blood test, usually a finger prick. Genital herpes, no symptoms, blood test. Different types of tests. Genital herpes, again, swab of the affected area and blood. Syphilis is a blood test or taken from the sore. HPV, genital warts, usually a visual exam. HPV, cervical cancer, a sample is taken from the cervix, as with the pap test, as you were mentioning. What else?
You really rushed it through.
Well, because I think there's still quite a bit that we need to cover.
Okay. So crabs, what were you going to say about crabs?
I think that's just a visual.
Yeah, I think it's a visual. You see them. I've never had that.
They're actual little crabs.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So
may you never see them.
May you never see them. Yes. So those are the kinds of tests. The throat swabs, I think, are the ones that are commonly missed. Like we had someone informed us that one of their partners another time had throat gonorrhea, which I think is not super common, but totally possible to get. So it's not something they normally test. So every time I go in now, I say, can you please do a throat swab, regardless of them?
Good.
Yeah. So important part is to be open and honest, get tested.
Open and honest with your partners, but also with your healthcare providers as well. Right?
Yeah.
Because there might be some people who present as straight, for example, and they've had sex with people who are bi or homosexual, and they may be somewhat reluctant or embarrassed to admit that initially. Be honest as possible, be as candid as possible. Information, communication power. So, yeah, for the most part, other than the pinprick, the tests really are not difficult to submit to.
Yeah, I know for women, if they suspect that you have cancer, or if you've had irregular cells after having a pap smear, they will do a biopsy, which includes like snipping a part of you, which is very painful, horrible.
But not submitting to those tests, the consequence of that, if you have it, is far worse than the little bit of pain endured in the testing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. It's good to inform yourself with knowledge, and share it. Like, I think what you like to say, you even just proactively share and say like, oh, I was tested this time. Because your test is really only a point in time. That's why you have to do it fairly frequently.
Exactly.
Or if you suspect something.
Yeah, the test tests you, gives you a result of what it was like at that moment that you were tested. But the time after that is now a new test required, right? Unless you have not had any variables change, which, is possible, but it's possible that it has changed.
Yes. Okay. And then obviously letting people know and just being, and I like when you say, it's like, should we have the talk? The talk. You actually, I've heard you say that in situations. Can we have the talk?
And you know what? I find that when I build it up like that, thought talk, and you announce it like that, people think, oh my God, what is he going to say? And then you say, well, it's about STI. And think, oh yeah, okay, well, that's like not a big deal.
Yeah.
But I like to present it like forward up front, and that way it kind of clears the air. And what's interesting also, when you announce it like that, you see how the other person responds, and if they really cower away from it, might be something that they're not yet so comfortable with that, and perhaps there's room for growth there. We always are growing. We're always expanding.
Always. Okay, and now to shift to a totally different subject with some connections, is you wanted to talk about hair.
Hair
there,
everywhere. So many things to say about hair. And we're talking about pubic hair, right? We're talking about
whole body hair.
I wasn't referring to the hair that was on my head.
No, but other body hair.
Right, okay. But I'm thinking specifically about pubic hair.
Okay.
And the love of it and the hate of it, and how we have a very long history. It's told that, or we know that the Egyptians, going back like 3,000 years ago, were removing hair through sugars, or they even had copper razors.
They even had razors, yeah.
Right. And they were doing that. So for whatever reasons, they decided to do that. And then fast forward into medieval times, people were removing their pubic hair because there was pubic lice, which is almost nearly eradicated now. It's very uncommon that we should have that. And we go forward into 1800s when Darwin suggested that the evolution of species showed less hair, right? So when we were cavemen, we were hairy Neanderthals, and we were needing that hair for protection. It was helping us through the elements. But he was putting forward this idea that as we evolve and we become higher up in the evolution, we might need less hair. And so we took that and ran to it to say that, well, we should rid ourselves of hair, that we don't want to appear savage or barbaric.
But it was also that people were more attracted to people with less body hair.
Well, why should they be attracted? They might believe that it's a form of evolution.
Sure.
I mean, where does that first attraction come from? How do we associate a hairier as more attractive or less attractive, or hairless as more attractive or less attractive? Somewhere that idea came. Well, the one school of thought that Darwin, and feel free to share your ideas, was that it was, we're elevating ourselves that way.
Oh, I see.
So here we go into the 70s, right? Well, so people were kind of going against that. But then in the 70s, with the women's lib movement, they were saying women should not feel as though they're the ones who are having to do this. And it was the return of the bush, and people were
return of the bush.
Until,
what about men?
No, women are always the ones who are subjugated to it, right? Women are always the one who are burdened by this.
But men too now. There's also manscaping. That's
becoming less. It's becoming more frequent, but it's generally the burden is
it's
on women.
newer.
Look at contraception, right? You have a condom for men.
Mhm.
Maybe you might have some guys who go as far as having a vasectomy, but there's birth control, IUDs, there's so many more things that women, it's always on the woman. Not always, but historically, there's
yes.
been a lot more, right?
Yeah, because there's nothing like the men did men remove hair too? Would they remove hair?
Yeah, for sure. But it's not to the same extent. And there's also the psychological parts, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. So anyway, so in the 70s, there was this movement towards the bush. Right? A lot of it is said to have come from the feminist movement until 1974, when the first hairless vagina was seen in Hustler. And that then
1974.
1974. And
2 years after I was born.
What a time. And then that kind of paved the way for people to jump on this idea. The porn was that we should remove the hair. My issue with removing hair, as a few of them, but one of them is that it tends to kind of, I think, make the vulva look as though it belongs to a little girl as opposed to a woman. And for me personally, I find that a bit disturbing. I think having some hair is adds another dimension. It's kind of mystery to it. But there's an interesting article that was in the New York Times a few years ago that spoke about women's relationship to their hair and how many women would become apologetic to their gynecologist if they didn't have a chance to clean up before going to their appointment. And the word clean up was used as though, as though to have some hair would imply that we're in some way dirty or perverse, when in fact it is the most natural thing. And there are studies that say that having pubic hair is in fact a filter for many things, that it keeps the vagina or vulva clean. But there's also evidence to say that that's actually not true.
Right, but I've heard people use the term clean in describing themselves. Oh, I haven't cleaned up, or I'm not clean, and it's such an interesting term to use. Like I'm sure I found myself in that same situation using that term. In fact, I had a partner a while ago, before I really did a lot other than just like the bikini line thing, that said something to me like, oh, you could maybe like clean up a little bit down there, or you could, or remove a bit of your hair. And then I got really paranoid and very conscious of the fact that I might be hairier, and I'd make sure that I'd time things when I was going to see them. So I'd make sure I waxed and and then found out only years later that it was like, oh, well, that's a preference, but I'm not, it doesn't really affect me. And I'm like, oh my God, in all these years, I've had this thing in my head. So now I'm just like.
But that preference, it's argued, is born out of are impressions that are made by watching mainstream porn. So the Hollywood version of porn shows these large-breasted women with no hair, and that becomes the standard, becomes normalized that way. So that when we see a natural-looking vajayjay with hair, we're like, wow, like you're supposed to be cleaning up, because all the images I've seen before are all cleaned and denuded of hair. But there is, I think, there's now a trend that hair is coming back, becoming more acceptable, and that we might be perfect just the way we are.
And some of us who waxed a lot can't now grow a lot of hair down there,
as well,
or had electrolysis.
Sure.
It's like the eyebrows. I think I overplucked my eyebrows in the 90s, so now my eyebrows, I have to practically draw them on. Like it's interesting the result, right? So I can grow a little bit of hair, but not a lot of hair.
Well, maybe we'll go to Istanbul and have hair plugs put in my bald spot and your
down there
vacant areas, and we'll be restored to our natural beauty. Yeah, where are we?
I like hair, no trouble with that. Oh, someone said.
Well, the point
Andre
is,
Turcotte sounds pro pubes. Yes, he's definitely pro.
Well,
hair.
Personally, yes, I like that. I like my men with less hair and my women with more hair, but that's a personal preference. But really, the part that's most important is that we should be accepting of ourselves. If we have hair or not, we should not see one as better than the other, or as it being in any way dirty. It is just who we are. If you have a preference to not ever, that is fine. Do your thing. But please resist thinking of yourself as any way defective for not having hair or having too much of it.
Yeah, and you can have it whichever way you want, hairless or not hairless.
That's
like, yeah,
body.
you be you, boo, as they say. Yeah, I mean, personally, I like to have not as much hair on my body. I don't like. I know you would prefer if I grew out my underarms.
I love you just the way you are.
But you do comment on my like blonde hair on my arms. I would never get rid of that. But people, women, even get like hair removed from their arms too. Yeah. Do we want to say anything else about hair? I think it's interesting too, and people like shaving versus waxing too, that whole thing.
Oh yeah, the stubble and everything. Yeah. I've heard people make comments that if they're with somebody who is shaven and then they perform oral sex or even PIV or PIA, that the razor stubble can be of an irritant for the recipient and the giver.
Preferences. That's the thing. You can have your preferences and you can have yourself as you want. But I think I liked your point about, like, you know, doing what you want and being comfortable with what you want and not doing something for somebody else.
Well, you know, I have a friend who has a Insta or fan page or whatever it is anyway, has one of those, and they are growing out their hair under their arms and elsewhere, and they receive a lot of kind of hate mail from people saying, like, you know, what's going on here, blah blah blah. And it's like, it's the shaming involved, and that's the saddest part, right? So whether you are going to have hair or not have hair, that we might refrain from judging others about it or feel in any way slighted about ourselves.
So those are our two main words for H. I know you there was some honorable mention that you wanted to make other H words that we're not discussing that are fun.
How could we have a day of H without mentioning horny? Horny.
Yeah, what's horny?
God, I don't know anymore. Horny is my state of being. Horny is the arousal level that I feel and wanting to be aroused. The idea of sex or relations making me feel excited and tingly. That's for me is kind of a horny feeling.
But it's an interesting term because you often will ask me, you'll say, oh, are you feeling horny? And it's like, I'm not feeling horny. I guess it's not a state of being for me. Like once in a while, I'll be like, oh, I'm like kind of excited and, you know, wanting to do something sexual. But I think
is that horny?
That's horny. But I think majority of the time I have to kind of build into it. So I don't naturally feel aroused and ready to go. Oh.
And now I wonder, has that changed over time?
Oh.
And the last H word that I wanted to come up with was hoe.
Hoe.
Yeah, dirty old hoe.
That's how you refer to yourself, is it?
I wear it as a badge of honor to be a dirty old hoe.
Yeah.
But not too dirty, right? STI tested dirty old hoe. Yeah.
That's what you mean by dirty old hoe. Not dirty, yeah. Now, what's our call for action today? What would like you to do out of today? We just wanted to give you a bit of information about STIs and testing and normalizing it and become comfortable with it. Basically, why not just go out and get tested?
Yeah, for sure. For your own peace of mind. And it makes you feel great when you get the report card back and it says, you know, straight A's. It's a good feeling.
Straight A's.
But yeah, the call for action today is go out, get tested, and also have the conversation about it, right? Have the conversation with your healthcare provider, have the conversation with your partners, and normalize it. It is just part of the human sexual experience, and it is in there where we have to participate in that.
And if, you know, as always, if you're ever having trouble having these conversations with your partners, reach out to us. We're always happy to help.
About this or anything else.
Yeah, just in general. And have yourself a great Monday.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. If you want to have secure, satisfying, and sexy relationships, check out our Polynudies digital course. It's 7 modules of all you need in one place. And as a thank you to our listeners, we're offering it at an exclusive price. Link is in the show notes, plus all the other awesome things we talked about today. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with TNA. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. You can check out the show notes for any of the links to the courses or information we talked about today. Thanks and have a fantastic and sexy day.